back. A part of segregation history will soon be demolished in Athens. For some, it's a source of pride and remembrance. KLTV7's April Purdon shows us the school building being torn down, but its history is not being erased, though.
The end of a new beginning for a school.
Opened up in 1955.
With so much history.
I started in 1959 as a first grader, but I obviously did see quite a bit of segregation during that period of time.
R.C. Fisher School in Athens, named after Richard Columbus Fisher, a principal that took pride in providing education for diverse communities, holds deep-rooted memories for many living in that area, especially during a divisive time in history.
With our neighbors being black on one side and then white on the other side.
And also witnessing a shift in history where Larry West saw
completion of segregation.
But today on
November 25th, 2024, R.C. Fisher began the demolition of the school.
After the city of Athens posted a Facebook post advising people to avoid the area for safety reasons, many people who live there were not happy with the demolition decision.
I'm a little bit remorse, but I understand as far as improvement is concerned in our community, change has to take place.
A change that the city of Athens says will represent a new chapter.
You have to understand during that period of segregation, the building material that went into the school was not the best material, and that's why it's probably being torn down as we speak today.
But bricks from the building will be preserved for a remembrance project.
For those coming in the future will say, hey, at one time this property housed a school that was in the period of segregation,
which will honor the memories tied to the school. April Purdon, KLTV 7 News.
The demolition process is expected to take several weeks depending on the weather.